What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting discussion in the comments section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. If you want more great sit down content, make sure you check us out on TikTok at the Sit Down Crime Pod. We cover past and present crime on a daily basis. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into another very interesting organized crime topic. And we talk a lot about rising stars in the mafia. And last week, 1 week ago today, I put out a video titled Top Mobsters Today. I went through 15 people that are not bosses of families that I consider the most powerful in the families today. A lot of people ask me why certain people weren't on it. Today, we're going to go back to what I said. We're going to talk about the rising stars, guys that are not necessarily on the hierarchy, maybe are on the hierarchy, and at some point might be considered as bosses of the family down the road. There are men on this list that are in their 30s. There are men on this list in their 40s. There's one thing we know about the mafia is that it has an age problem. So today we're going to highlight 10 individuals that are coming up quick in the family. A rising star is considered a person or thing that is quickly becoming popular or important in a specific field. Let's highlight those 2024 rising stars here today. The first individual I want to talk about, I'm pretty sure you've never heard of. In fact, if you've seen him, you probably thought maybe he was still in college. He's a young man, still in his 30s. It's reputed Gambino made member Anthony Sinka. Now, Sinka is not even 40 years old, and he is actually currently under indictment after he was arrested recently on state gambling and loan sharking charges. It was said that he has been made into the family over the last year or two, and that he came up under Staten Island captain Frank Camuso. Now, Sinka is what we would call a large earner. In fact, most of the individuals that are young and being made into the Gambino family, people that are in their 20s and 30s, are huge earners. And I'm not talking about a couple of pizzerias. Mr. Sinka is a big earner, and it's said that he owns car dealerships, one of which is in Edison, New Jersey. Now, I'm not going to name the car dealership. That said, it's said that Sinka's car dealership sells used high-end automobiles, everything from Bentleys to Mercedes to Aston Martins, Maseratis, and Ferraris. This guy's a big-time earner. I don't have to say that enough. It's also said that, according to the government, he used those dealerships to launder money that he was doing on the street involving loan sharking and gambling, and that various members and associates of the family were involved as well. Sinka is a guy who, again, is quite young, and down the road is a person who will be very beneficial to the hierarchy of this family. The next person on this list comes from the Genovese crime family. He is from the Bronx, and his name is Michael Hippie Zanfardino. Now, Zanfardino is both an earner but also an enforcer. This is an individual who has committed various shootings over his career, most of them as a young man. Now, I highlighted Zanfardino in a video I did on a farm team called the Tanglewood Boys. At one point, Zanfardino got into an argument with a person called Darren Mazzarella and shot him 14 times. It's also said that he shot another individual at a park in the Bronx. Now, other families were pissed off at Zanfardino, most notably the Lucchese crime family. He would go to one of his pals, Barney Bellomo, who smoothed it over for Hippie. The problem, though, is Hippie would be indicted and ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison. He would spend over a decade in the feds and was released in 2016. It said recently that Hippie Zanfardino was named acting captain of the old 116th Street crew after Patsy Falchetti was elevated. So again, Hippie is getting new responsibilities, and I think a lot of them have to do with his relationship with Barney Bellomo. Hippie has been groomed. He has been stuck up for by Bellomo, and probably at one point his life was saved because of it. Hippie is now a trusted member of the Bellomo inner circle. The next person on this list is the lone person on the list of the Colombo crime family. It's Joseph Amato. Now, as we know, the Colombo crime family is probably the weakest of all of these crews. That said, the new leadership involving Robert D'Onofrio is probably the most stable we've seen this family for a while. A lot of the older members of D'Onofrio's family at this point are in prison, but Joey Amato and his relationship with D'Onofrio go way back. They are both originally from Brooklyn and came up under Wild Bill Catolo. Now, it's said that Joe Amato today is one of the strongest mob captains on Staten Island. In fact, in wiretap conversations, Joseph Amato has made that very clear, quoting, quote, "This is my island, not yours. I have eyes all over. I'm what's called a man's man. Anyone can end up in jail. I don't wish it on anybody, especially weak men who can never deal with it. I thrive there and anywhere I go." End quote. Joseph Amato is very powerful on Staten Island, and a guy who, in a family that's still pretty maligned, is one of the stronger people in it. I'd have to think down the road, he may even be acting at this point on the hierarchy. I don't think there's any question that involving several other people, he's one of the strongest people today in the Colombo crime family, and he's said to be well respected by various families. We head back to the Gambino crime family for number 7 on this list, and it's a guy maybe you haven't heard of. It's a guy called Paul Semplus. Now, Semplus is a reputed made member of the Gambinos and is said to be a captain in one of the Sicilian factions of this family. Now, I talked to various people that know who Paul Semplus is, and they would say that he is essentially the Tommy Bilotti to Paul Castellano of Lorenzo Menino. In fact, Semplus himself has stated that in wiretaps, he is extremely close to Lorenzo Menino. At one point, when talking about Menino, Semplus would state on wiretap, quote, "We're like brothers, you know, and he wants to keep me by his side." He would also discuss Semplus his loan sharking business, quoting that he had nearly $200,000 on the street and was banking $7,000 a month from a single customer. He would explain, quote, "I gave him 4,500 interest every 2 weeks," referring to the customer. "And according to a filing, that's 9,000 a month I get. I'm doing good," he said. And then he stated he's extremely trusted by Lorenzo Menino and that he's essentially kind of his eyes and ears. Semplus is very trusted in the higher echelons of this family. And down the road, we know that connections in life get you everywhere. And having such connections with such a powerful man will pay dividends for Paul Semplus down the road. Now, at one point in 2019, Paul Semplus was given 28 months on loan sharking charges. He would be released about a year later in June of 2020. He is currently 60 years old. The number 6 on this list, and remember, they are not ranked in terms of power. They're just 10 people that I included numbers beside. Number 6 is another member of the Gambino crime family. It's Lis Bo Filipelli. I'm asked all the time, is the mafia still involved in construction? Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Filipelli and some of the other people on this list are titans of the construction industry. Lis Filipelli is originally from the Bronx, and at one point he was actually involved with Local 780 of the Cement Workers Union. He would come up in New Jersey under Arnold Squitieri, who is in front of him in this photo, in front of Mr. Filipelli is Squitieri on the left and Andrew Campos on the right. I believe also Robert Vaccaro is next to Filipelli. They were at a golf outing in this photo. This is in the mid 2000s. Now, Filipelli is a huge earner and eventually take over the Squitieri crew once him and Funzy Siska were out of the way. Now, I mentioned Filipelli is big in construction. In fact, he has had a relationship for some time with a person called James Cahill, who at one point was the president of the New York State Building and Constructions Trade Council. Now, Cahill is a mob associate and has been for years, involving various families. And Cahill would actually gush about his relationship with Bo Filipelli, as well as a person called Miljeta Miljanic, who I've talked about in a video. He is a Serbian gangster and is said to be close with Bo Filipelli as well. Filipelli is a stalwart and has made a ton of money in construction over the years. In fact, at one point, he would have James Cahill on payroll, and we'd have to figure he got many kickbacks over the years because of it. Bo Filipelli has served many years in prison. In fact, he would be indicted alongside Squitieri back in the 2000s, and that had to do with an undercover operation involving Joaquin Jack Garcia, who we've had on this show, an FBI agent who infiltrated the Gambino crime family. Another person on this list is another Gambino member, and he is also a titan of construction. It is Frank Camuso. Now, Frank Camuso is reputed to be a captain on Staten Island at one point, tied to Carmine Sciandra, who we talked about on last week's video. Now, Camuso is yet another big earner with big earners in his crew, including Anthony Sinka, who we talked about previously in this video. Also connected to Camuso are Louis Astuto and this guy, a person called Robert Basalich. Now, Basalich is a convicted bookmaker on Staten Island. That said, he was also involved recently in what the federal government would call a wide-ranging kickback conspiracy. According to the feds, Basalich gave inside info about competitors' construction bids to co-conspirators and directed subcontractors to raise their offers to an amount that would allow him to pocket large kickbacks. A portion of the payoff would make its way to companies owned by Frank Camuso, who was allegedly his captain. Now, remember, Basalich was the former vice president of something called the Rinaldi Group, a Secaucus, New Jersey-based contractor that allegedly received approximately $4.2 million in payments from contractors who received $100 million in contracts for construction and change orders he awarded them in return for kickbacks that were funneled to companies that he controlled. So again, construction is still very much going on, and these guys are involved in hotels and commercial businesses, all sorts of things, and they are fixing bids. So again, the kickbacks can come to them, and they're then funneling it up to other members of families, of their families, including people like Camuso and Bo Filipelli. Now, Camuso is, again, also a very trusted man, and at one point received a good amount of money from Mr. Basalich. I would think down the road, Mr. Camuso has to be thought of as potential hierarchy and leadership possibilities. Another person on this list that is from the Gambino family we talked about recently is Andrew Campos. This is another guy who received various kickbacks and has benefited from people like James Cahill and other people that we've talked about here today. As I discussed in the video I did on Campos that could be seen here, he was also very involved in construction, has actually done prison time recently over also fixing bids and being involved with mob-connected construction people. He also, as we've talked about, made tens of millions of dollars for the Gambino crime family in the 90s and 2000s in one of the largest telemarketing schemes ever made and constructed. Andrew Campos, as I've talked about, came up under Frank Lacasio and his son, Torrey Lacasio. He also has a very strong crew based out of the Bronx and Westchester County. So one thing that is very interesting about the last three people I discussed is they all live in different areas. One of them lives and operates in Staten Island. One of them lives and operates in New Jersey. One of them operates in the Bronx in Westchester County. I'm going to say this, and this is not a secret to anybody that knows this stuff. The Gambino crime family is the strongest family today. Okay. The three people I just mentioned, that is a very strong capo group. Very. Okay. And all of those people down the road may be thought of as leadership when it matters most. Very powerful, very rich family, have a ton of money coming in. And some of the people I mentioned, like, we're not talking about a couple of $1,000,000. These guys are rich, rich. Like, they have a lot of money. Very strong family. Number two on this list, we head back to the West Side, the Genovese crime family. And we will talk about a guy who, over the years, is someone who, if you've heard of this family, maybe you know a little bit about. It's Pasquale Uncle Patty Falcetti. Now, Falcetti has been around for a long period of time, and actually, as a young gangster, was around Chin Gigante. In fact, it's thought of that he was involved in certain conspiracies to take out people connected to Chin, though never brought on charges in them. Falcetti has been a stalwart for years on the docks, involving himself with the International Longshoremen's Association. In fact, in the 2000s, he was indicted in a federal case surrounding the ILA. Falcetti, again, close to Chin, but was also very close and is still very close with Liborio Barney Baloma. Now, one of the interesting things about Falcetti is his relationship with this guy, a person called Harold Daggett. Now, involving the ILA, Harold Daggett is the national president of the ILA. He runs over 40,000 dock workers. Harold Daggett is extremely powerful. And what's interesting is when Mr. Falcetti went to prison in the 2000s, it's alleged that once his son, Patty Jr., got out of high school, his relationship with Daggett earned Jr. a job on the docks, and down the road, certain government agencies looked into this and attempted to remove Falcetti Jr. from the docks. And Harold Daggett over the years has been very involved and supposedly been a mob associate for years, especially with the Genovese crime family. It's also wondered as to why Harold Daggett has a nearly 80-foot yacht. He drives a Bentley. Again, I guess being a union president has its perks, but you got to wonder if there are other ways that Mr. Daggett is making money. Falcetti recently has been to prison for loan sharking and allegedly being involved in selling weed. Now, he would be embroiled after speaking and giving a loan to this guy, a person called Anthony Zocolilo, who down the road would flip. Falcetti was released several years ago and is said to be possibly on the administration of the Genovese crime family, but for years ran the 116th Street crew. He's still fairly young, Patty Falcetti, and is, again, part of the inner circle for Barney Baloma. Let's get to several others, and then we'll wrap this video up. We go to the Bonanno crime family, and I want to talk about one of their higher up people and he's not even becoming a rising star. He is a rising star. It's Ernest Ernie Aiello. Now, this guy is also very important to the boss of that family, Michael Mancuso. According to Aiello, he would state on wiretap that he is the cousin of Michael Mancuso and is said to be what he calls his eyes and ears. In fact, also in a recorded conversation with Anthony Zocolilo, who was around all sorts of Harlem and Bronx people, Aiello would tell Zocolilo that during the time that Mancuso was in prison in the early to mid 2010s, he was the guy on the street for Mancuso, ferrying messages back and forth, writing letters, taking care of things for Mancuso while he was in prison. Now, Ernest Aiello is also said to be quite close with other members of families, including being seen on surveillance at a Home Depot with members of the Genovese crime family based in the Bronx, like Ralph Balsamo. So Aiello is a guy who is not only respected by his own family, the boss of this family, but also other families. People have talked about Mancuso being a little bit of a cagey guy. He does some cagey things at times, but Aiello is really young too. He's in his 40s. So, down the road when some of the older folks in this family pass away, maybe someone like Bruno and Delicato, it has been said that Aiello may actually be on the hierarchy already. But he down the road absolutely will be. Now, Aiello allegedly was ordered by Mr. Mancuso several years ago to go to the wake of Bonanno old man Vito Grimaldi and assault a shelved member of this family called Joseph Camerano. Now, the lawyer for Mancuso has denied that this ever happened. That said, there was a dust up at the funeral, and supposedly one of the people sent by Mancuso who definitely didn't fare well in the fight with a bunch of bikers was Ernest Aiello. Now, we've heard Ernest Aiello's name and other things too, and that at one point someone called him to me a, quote, pit bull enforcer. Again, I've heard he's definitely a tough guy, so that's indeed possible. But down the road, Aiello will be maybe boss at some point. I mean, he's very young, one of the youngest people on this list, and is considered very respected by the Bonannos and has had good connection with other groups like the Genovese as well. Let's get to the final person on this list. And there's one family we have not mentioned here today. We've mentioned the Genovese. We've mentioned the Colombo, Gambino, and Bonanno families. We haven't mentioned the Lucchese family. Let's get to someone on that list today. And you may have forgotten about him, or maybe you haven't even heard of him. We've heard of names in the Lucchese family like Stephen Crea and Matty Madonna, Vic Camuso, and Anthony Casso. But what about Georgie Neck Zoppola? You probably forgot about him because Georgie Neck has done over 20 years in prison. Now, it recently has been reported by people like John Panisi that Zoppola is the acting boss in waiting. It's no secret that Michael DeSantis, the alleged acting boss of this family, is getting older, and he wants to take more of a back seat. The official boss by name only is Victor Amuso. That said, Victor Amuso is quite old and will eventually die. I think once DeSantis gets out of the way and Amuso passes, the new boss of this family will absolutely be George Zoppola. George Zoppola is not 58 like in this photo. He is, I believe, 61 years old, but he's still fairly young. And like all the people I just mentioned, Georgie Neck is from Brooklyn and very respected by people like Amuso. In fact, it's alleged that in the 90s, Georgie Neck was involved in multiple whackings for this family, including a person called Michael Papadio, which Georgie Neck would down the road plead guilty to. It's also said that he took part in whacking a person called James Bishop, who was a union official. Now, Georgie Neck, alongside several of his brothers, actually came up as bank robbers. They were involved in a group called the Bypass Gang, who were sophisticated bank robbers and made a ton of money in bank robberies. Georgie Neck was ultimately indicted in 1994. That said, became a fugitive. He would down the road be arrested and plead guilty to 2 whackings. He was given 22 years in the feds. Now, during his time in the feds, Georgie Neck was allegedly involved in a bizarre thing that he tried to do. According to the police and the feds, he attempted to smuggle his sperm out of prison and bribe the security prison guard to do it so he could go to a fertility clinic to impregnate his longtime girlfriend. Now, from what I understand, this little situation was figured out and Georgie Neck had a little bit of a problem. But hey, you still got to try to have kids, and going to prison for a long period of time will hurt those chances. And it would be figured out due to the fact that he essentially had his DNA. And that prison guard was actually charged with smuggling contraband and fired. So kind of a bizarre situation. Georgie Neck was released in 2014. And my apologies, I said he was 61. Georgie Neck is 65 years old. Here he can be seen in a photo with sunglasses on the far right. I know it's kind of a blurry photo, but this is, essentially multiple higher end people in this family meeting at a park, I believe in Manhattan. This was in 2020. I think down the road, this will absolutely be the boss of the Lucchese crime family. Maybe not now, but eventually. All of the people mentioned today are established members. That said, they are rising stars. They're becoming popular or important in a specific field. Did I miss anybody? Let me know down below of people that I may have missed. Now, I know people will make jokes about people like Peter Tuccio or guys like that. Did I miss someone from another family? Let me know. The five families are king, and I included mostly, in fact, all people from the five families in this video. Let me know who I missed in the comment section below. We'll see you next week here on the